Welcome to Fishing with Gussy. As you can see, I'm bundled up and it's kind of late summer. We just launched the boat, and for today's show, we're gonna be chasing bass. And we're on a lake that I've only fished, I think, 2 times in the last 10 years. I fished it quite a bit when I was younger, so I know my way around a little bit, but I don't know what's going on out here all that much. So I've got about 15 rods in the rod locker of my boat here, of the one Predator, and I'm gonna try a little bit of everything. There's some smallmouths in here, some largemouths, and we've had kind of like the first big cold front that's sort of bringing on fall over the last 36 or 48 hours. So the fishing might be a little bit tough. It might be really good. I have no idea. So we're gonna just try a bunch of things today and see if we can put it together and catch some big fish, and sort of show you how I would approach showing up for a tournament on a body of water that I know a little bit about, but maybe not a whole lot. So just try, some shallow, some deep. I'm gonna look at the Humminbird quite a bit and see if I can mark some fish out deep, and try and put the pieces of the puzzle together.
Fishing with Gussy is proudly sponsored by and uses Shimano rods and reels. Visit fish.shimano.com for more information.
We just pulled up to the first spot, and I'm gonna fish a few places first where I've caught them the last couple times that I've been out here. So just to try to get a feel for where the fish are, if they're a little bit deeper, if they're fairly shallow still. I'm gonna try a couple largemouth spots and a couple of smallmouth spots, and then we're gonna go do some exploring, try some new water, and see if we can catch some big fish. So I'm gonna start off. This is a 5/8 ounce Northland jungle jig. I've been using these jigs since I was a teenager, and they got a really good, weedless head design. I've caught more big largemouths on that jig than anything else. So one of my, kind of go-to confidence baits, and it's a bait that you're gonna catch big fish on as well. So, it might be a little cool to catch them on a frog, but I got a Jackall frog tied on. I've got a wacky rigged Jackall flick shake worm right here. And a lot of anglers in our part of the world like to use Senkos and the straight stick type worms, and they work great. This is a very similar thing, but just a little different look. It's got a lot of salt in it, it's heavy, and then I've also got a little nail weight in the bottom of it, and it's, you can hear it's kind of windy today, so that little bit of weight's gonna help it get down. But I'm gonna cast that around if I see a tree or, find some fish or have a rock that I wanna pitch it out to. And then I've got a spinnerbait tied on too, just for, covering some ground and beating the bank. So let's see if we can go find some fish. So now that it's late in the summer, you can see the leaves aren't really changing a whole lot yet. A few are starting to, but these largemouths will spend a lot of their time, most of the summer, in the shallow water, and it doesn't take too many of these kind of cold nights and cooler days, and the fish will start pulling out. And these are the kinds of places, you can see the rock up in front of me. These first little rocky spots and points leading out of these shallow bays are kind of the place where these fish sort of move out to, and they'll actually start to school up and group up. And through September and October, if you can find the little spots that they like, you can catch a lot of fish, and some big ones too. But the water temperature's still in the high 60s, so I mean it's not super cold yet, so they can still be fairly shallow as well. One of the most important things when you're fishing a jig like this, and the mistake that I think some people make, is you got to let it sink right to the bottom and try to let it sink on a slack line. I can sort of see, the weeds aren't real heavy here, but I can kind of see, you know, where the rock's coming into the water, and I'm just sort of trying to drop it on the, you know, on that line where the weeds sort of start. So when I hit the water, I always let a little bit of line out. If you let the jig fall on a tight line, it's going to fall back towards you, and a lot of times it's going to fall into the weeds and get kind of hung up. So you always want it to kind of fall straight, and then it's going to go into those holes and stuff a little bit better and not get hung up on the weeds. The weeds are still nice and green, so that's a good sign. The best weeds and grass are always the greenest stuff. So that's another thing you want to look for, especially into the fall. And something like that, I mean, is always going to be better on those bright, sunny summer days. I love going underneath those things. Today, I wouldn't be surprised if there was one there right now, because it probably, that thing might be holding a little bit of heat maybe. I don't know. Be a little bit warmer possibly there. We're gonna make one more cast off the end of this sucker and then go to the next spot. If we don't get anything. All right. Next spot. We'll take a break, be back, and we're gonna continue up the shoreline, and I guarantee you I'm gonna catch a big largemouth. So this is a strip of shoreline that I've actually never fished before really, and so I'm just sort of hot-footing her along here. It looks okay. It's coming out of a big shallow bay back here. So just kind of going along and looking for either some nice green weeds or, you know, a rock thing like this that sort of sticks out. This one looks okay, but there's no weeds really around it, so it's probably not perfect. There we go. That's what we're looking for right there. That's a nice largemouth. Yeah. Wow. That's really another reason why I like to fish with these jigs, is they're so efficient. You know, I can go along, I got my trolling motor on like 50 right now, and I'm just going along the bank and just pitching this jig at every little thing I can find, every hole in the weeds, rock, there's a log, and those big largemouths love these things, so that's sweet. That's what we're after. You know, I'm having a hard time going and looking for the smallmouths because it's pretty windy out on the main lake. I can get back into these shallow bays and kind of hide out. And if we're catching fish like that, that's all right with me. As you can see, it's not real super nice. We're just waiting for this little rain cloud to kind of go by us, and then we're gonna carry on up the lake a little bit farther, but windy, cold, rain. But if you like to fish and you only get, you know, this day or that day to get out, and the weather isn't going to stop you, you got to go no matter what. So it is what it is. We're still going to find some fish and catch them, I think. I don't like it. Just covering a little ground here with some topwater. It's just kind of a shallow channel out here that I know the fish do like, so I'm gonna flip my jig around some of this little rock deal here too in a second. I'm just sort of casting around, seeing if there's any active customers. Well, the pike seem to be biting. Whoa. Look at that. He's not much bigger than the bait. That's called a Jackall bow stick, and just a big walking bait, and something that makes quite a bit of noise. You can hear it, and can call those fish in. And one thing about fishing in the fall, later in the year, is that these bass and every species for that matter, they're not afraid to eat a big meal. So they're looking to feed up before the long winter hits, and so you can catch them on some big baits and get their attention. And the bigger stuff's more effective sort of later in the year than it is earlier in the year. There we go. That feels like a good one. Yeah. Whoa. That's why you use the big jig right there. Look at that. That's a nice largemouth. That's the kind we're kind of looking for, and we'll take those all day long. So he's in a spot where I'd kind of expect a fish to be. There's some pencil reeds and a little bit of a rock point coming out. We've got all the big shallow stuff in behind us. So those fish are coming out to this stuff, and over the next couple of months there's going to be more and more of them will pull up on a spot like that. But that's a nice big chunky Sunset Country largemouth. Love those things. All right, we're gonna let this guy go, take a break, and hopefully we'll be into some big fish when we get back. There we go. That's a nice one. Whoa.
Tech Tips is brought to you by Northland Fishing Tackle, made by fishermen for fishermen.
All right, I like to sort of go through a number of different baits when I'm Texas rigging and flipping, and those first few fish I caught this morning were on a jig, a Northland jungle jig right there, and then I got it bit off just a few minutes ago, so I got to put a new one of those on. Setting up a new piece of plastic. On the Texas rig, I like the Texas rig for those thicker weed areas in general. You can fish it in that open stuff on the rock weed stuff where I was fishing that jig as well, and that's where I just caught that last fish. But if you're throwing a frog and you get a blow up, in that rice or, thicker stuff, this, package is gonna be a lot more compact to drop in those holes and not get caught up on all the other weeds as much. So this is just a Northland Impulse Beaver, and pretty good bait. It's nice, and it's got that slim profile, so it's pretty easy to drop in all those holes. I want to get that hook. You can kind of measure where the hook fits in perfect, but you want it to be totally straight, just like that. And then the legs kind of come attached, so I like to pull them apart, and then those they'll kind of flap around and have a little bit more action. So that's that. On the jungle jig now, you can actually use these beavers they work as a pretty nice trailer on these jigs as well. And same thing, I'll attach them, disattach them, and maybe bite off like a quarter, half inch off just so it's not sticking out super far. And then just kind of push it up on there. And that's a little bit bigger trailer than I was using before, but it gives that jig a nice profile, and that's nothing for a 3 or 4 or 5 pound largemouth to eat that. That's the kind of fish we're looking for. So I'm gonna tie this on my other rod, and we're gonna be back in action.
Tech Tips is brought to you by Northland Fishing Tackle, made by fishermen for fishermen.
I threw right back into the same place where I caught that largemouth a second ago and got a smallmouth. Not a giant, but we're on the board. We're catching fish. That's what I want to see. Let's see if we can catch something else. So you can see in here how this point kind of sticks out. And I'm just pitching my jig, you know, right on the edge of those reeds. And the rock kind of comes right into that little zone too. That might have even been another bite. I think it was. I probably need a new chunk on there, but I want to catch one more fish first. That was quick. That's in that same place, so you find those little sweet spots where the fish are starting to congregate and you can just put a whacking on them. Aren't those largemouths pretty? That's not a big one, but nice pretty fish. Nice and gold and yellow. I love them. You know, a lot of those lakes that I fished some of the tournaments on down south, the largemouths are just not as nice and chunky and nicely colored as these ones are. You know, usually if you catch a couple like that, you could, you know, give it an hour and go fish up the bank or try a few other spots and then come back there again in an hour and probably get a couple more fish to bite. Okay. Just pulled up. This is a spot that I have fished recently, and there was some nice smallmouths here. It's a bridge and there's some current, and I just threw my tube up there on the first cast, and I got a pretty nice smallmouth here. Probably gonna reach down and grab this guy because I got a little bit lighter line on. But yeah, that's not a giant, but a pretty nice one for the first cast. And I bet you there's more of them in there. There you go. That's a nice one. Whoa. That's a big one. Well, pretty nice. Man, he came tearing out of that little tree in there. That's awesome. So the largemouths are biting pretty good now that we've sort of found a little area that has some fish. That was the same deal, just on a little bit of a rockweed mix, and classic spot. So, well, we're gonna blast under the bridge. I'm gonna get my snag off, and we're gonna take a break and come back, and we might be catching some largemouths. I might hit my head on the bridge. We might be catching some smallmouths. But in the meantime, I gotta retie, so don't go anywhere.
Many people still consider vintage and wooden lures to be the ultimate mark of craftsmanship. At the Northern Ontario Sport Fishing Centre in Sioux Narrows, Dan Luch's collection definitely stands out. On display are some classic lures and shapes that were sure to land some big fish. Some anglers still use vintage lures, swearing by their long-lasting finishes and natural feel. Generally hand-carved, these lures are tuned to produce great movement and vibration in the water. Their paint is layers of primer, color, and varnish to keep the water out and attract the right kind of fish. In small ways, each are unique and thus earning a favorite spot in each angler's tackle box with a story to tell on each hook. Many modern plastic and injection molded lures are still formed using wood-carved models to get the look, feel, and movement just right before being manufactured. This impressive collection can be viewed in person all summer long at the center, so stop in and see these pieces of fishing history.
We do this with a lot of our soft plastics, but one way to kind of prolong the life of your baits when you're fishing them on a jig is to glue them on. And then it sort of prevents them from just getting pulled down and tearing, you know, quite as easy. And all it takes is like a dab of super glue. And, you know, that's sort of the better quality can. If you get the little cheapo 99-cent cans or bottles, they last you for about 1 day and then they're not very good. So get the good can, and that's it. Just a dab of glue and then push your trailer up on the jig and you're good to go again. And I'll be able to catch, you know, unless the fish bites off one of the legs, I'll be able to catch a few fish on that. So just keep my glue right here. We're back in action. There's some, I can see now the sun's out, there's a couple nice boulders there where I had that bite. I think a lot of the times when you get those bites and you miss them, usually they're those small pike. Those bass, especially if it's a big one, they don't miss all that often, I don't think. But you never know, you always cast back in there, because I've certainly had, you know, a bite, miss the fish, pitch back in and caught a big bass too. I'm not saying that it doesn't happen, but I think more often than not it's those little pike that, you know, they just take a wild swing at your bait, and that's what happens. So there's an old beaver house right here, and I can see, you know, there's all kinds of sticks way out in front of this thing. There we go. Another pretty nice largemouth. I think I found a pretty good little stretch here. That's another pretty heavy fish. No giants. One of these times it's going to be a big 5-pounder, but these are all, you know, this last couple fish are 3.5, 3 3/4 pounders. So take those. That's awesome. I bet you there's another one in there too. Funny, man, these jigs have been around forever. And lots of people use them, but a lot of people don't really use them as much as they probably should. And I can tell you one thing, that over all the years of fishing in the, you know, the KBI and the tournaments on Lake of the Woods, we've caught more big largemouths on these jungle jigs than anything else.
Fishing with Gussy proudly uses and is sponsored by Jackall Lures.